The room went silent the moment he opened his folder, because everyone knew what that meant. Senator Whitehouse didn't come to make a speech. He came to lay out a trail of receipts, dates, rulings, direct quotes, and expose a story the FBI director has been trying to bury under shifting explanations and procedural fog. And what happened next didn't just rattle the room. It changed the mood of the entire hearing. Because when a senator accuses the nation's top law enforcement official of lying under oath, not once but twice, every second counts and every sentence could be career-ending. And the most shocking part, this wasn't a political rant.
In the matter where he ended up providing grand jury testimony, we've never had an FBI director come through this committee who had pled the fifth before. As you know, when you plead the fifth, to do it honestly, you have to have a good faith belief that your testimony would subject you to criminal liability, which meant, if Patel was being honest, he had a good faith belief that his testimony would subject him to criminal liability. As that went forward, he ended up getting immunity from the government in order to testify. If this were a court, a civil court, a judge would allow an adverse inference to be drawn against the witness who had asserted the fifth. In Patel's proceedings, we were never even allowed to get to the bottom of the grand jury testimony. Why he pled the fifth, what he said, all of that was papered over as he went through this committee to confirmation. So for obvious reasons, I pursued that question, just as you would, Chairman, if the shoe were on the other foot. And I believe that Patel lied to us in the committee. He said that he couldn't share his grand jury testimony, and I'm quoting him here, because there's a court order on that case. He said, he said again, I can't go into court orders granted by the DC District Chief Judge. And then when I pressed him further, he challenged me saying, you want me to violate a court order? He then went on to say to Senator Booker that his grand jury testimony has been sealed by the Department of Justice, and I'm not allowed to discuss it here. Well, as it turns out, none of that was true. All of that was false. And we know that because the DC District Chief Judge, who he mentioned in his false statement to this committee, said, and I'm quoting the judge, July 2025, Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E allows witnesses like Patel to divulge the contents of their testimony, meaning that nothing was preventing him from doing so before the committee, unquote. So it sure looks like he lied about that. So in his recent testimony, I asked him again. And now he offered the committee a new and different lie, which is that he had released the transcript already. He said, first of all, I'd love my grand jury testimony to be released. I want it made public. And then he said, I wanted the transcript released, and I will get it to you, sir, to me. I wanted the transcript released, and I will get you the transcript. He said to me, we can confirm that pursuant to my action, that grand jury testimony has been released, the transcript. He said the transcript has been released publicly. He told Senator Booker, well, I don't have the grand jury transcript. That's why I released it. So, as it turns out, no transcript was released. He was making up that lie, probably to get away from having to answer our questions. But now we have an FBI director who first lied in committee about a non-existent court order and had that lie exploded by the actual judge who he claimed had him under court order, and then lied in committee about having released a transcript that we all know has not been released. I think on that state of facts, we're entitled to get the transcript that he says he wants us to have, that he says he released publicly, and that the judge has confirmed is not under any court order of protection. So, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you. I know you have a strong interest in FBI chiefs testifying honestly in this committee and not lying to Congress to try to get to the bottom of what is going on, because those seem like two pretty flagrant and obviously provable lies. And we'll follow up for further assistance to get to the bottom of this. But I don't think it's asking too much to ask the committee's support, to ask Director Patel to do what he says he has already done, which is to release the grand jury transcript of his testimony and provide it to us. Thank you.
This wasn't exaggeration. This was a senator calmly reading the record, quoting a federal judge, and revealing contradictions that no one in that room expected to hear spoken out loud. But if you think this confrontation was just another tense moment in Washington, you're missing the scale of what was really happening. Because the claims Senator Whitehouse made cut straight to credibility, legality, and whether the FBI director can be trusted to tell the truth while sworn in. And once you hear the timeline the senator lays out, it's impossible to unsee the pattern. Senator Whitehouse begins with a fact that, by itself, would have been the headline in any normal political era. He reminds the committee that before Patel became FBI director, he invoked the Fifth Amendment in a matter involving his own grand jury testimony. That alone froze the room, because an incoming director of the FBI, someone whose job is enforcing the law at the highest level, taking the Fifth is almost unheard of. No FBI director had ever come through that committee with that history. And as the senator explained, invoking the Fifth isn't a casual move. It's not symbolic. It requires a good faith belief that answering questions would expose you to criminal liability. Not embarrassment. Not political risk. Criminal liability. That single fact already complicates the story of how he later took over one of the most powerful law enforcement positions in the country. And Senator Whitehouse doesn't say this for shock value. He says it because it sets the stage for everything that follows. If the FBI director once believed speaking honestly would incriminate him, then transparency becomes more than a political question, it becomes a legal one. But that was only the beginning. Because when Patel went before the committee during his confirmation, he didn't just dodge questions about that grand jury testimony. He said he couldn't discuss it at all. He told senators he was under a court order. He said the judge in the case prohibited him from revealing what he said. He repeated it more than once. "I can't," he insisted, pointing to a supposed order from the D.C. District Chief Judge. He even pushed back, asking if the committee wanted him to violate a court directive. And because the committee believed him, they couldn't press further. You can't force someone to violate a judge's order. That's the kind of thing that shuts down questioning entirely. But this is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Because according to Senator Whitehouse, everything Patel said about that court order was false. Not exaggerated. Not misremembered. False. The senator then reads directly from the chief judge herself. In July 2025, she ruled that Rule 6E of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure allows witnesses, like Patel, to reveal their own grand jury testimony. They are free to share what they said. Nothing stops them. No permission required. No court order needed. Which means Patel was never barred from speaking. He wasn't restricted by the judge. And he wasn't prevented from answering questions during his confirmation. That alone is explosive. Because if the judge says he was allowed to share his own testimony, then his entire explanation collapses. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an interpretation. It was presented as a fact stated repeatedly, and then used to avoid questions about why he invoked the Fifth in the first place. The senator doesn't raise his voice. He simply lays out the contradiction. And you could feel the tension in the room shift. Because once a witness makes a false claim under oath, everything else becomes fair game. But Senator Whitehouse wasn't finished. What came next raised the stakes even higher. In Patel's more recent testimony, the senator pressed him again. If you weren't restricted, why didn't you tell the committee the truth? Why not explain what happened? And that's when Patel introduced a second claim, one that Senator Whitehouse calls a new lie. Patel suddenly said he had already released the transcript. He said he wanted it public. He said he'd get it to the senator. He said it had been made available because of his own action. He repeated the statement to more than one senator. He claimed the transcript was already out there for anyone to read. Except it wasn't. According to Senator Whitehouse, no transcript has been released. Not to him. Not to the committee. Not to the public. There is no record of it anywhere. The FBI didn't publish it. The Department of Justice didn't publish it. And the court didn't publish it. Which means that when Patel said it was already released, he wasn't telling the truth. And if that's the case, then the committee wasn't just misled once. It was misled twice, first about a court order that didn't exist, and then about a transcript that was never made public. That's when the seriousness of the moment becomes impossible to deny. Because the senator isn't accusing Patel based on rumors or partisan talking points. He's presenting contradictions that can be verified with documents. A judge's ruling. A committee record. The absence of a transcript Patel insisted had already been released. And the timing matters. These claims weren't made in casual interviews or political speeches. They were made under oath during official testimony. And that transforms everything. Because misleading Congress while sworn in isn't just unethical. It's a violation with real consequences. But Senator Whitehouse keeps his focus tight. He isn't talking about punishment. He's talking about transparency. If Patel truly believes the transcript should be public, if he says he wants the transcript released, if nothing legally prevents him from sharing it, then give the committee what it's owed. Give the public what they were told exists. Hand over the transcript. And that's the core tension in this moment. Senator Whitehouse is not demanding speculation or fighting over interpretation. He's asking for exactly what Patel said he already made public. The transcript that should, in theory, already be available. And he's doing it because the credibility of the FBI director isn't an optional part of the job. It's the foundation of the job. The director cannot function without trust. The institution cannot function without transparency. And the American public cannot trust an agency whose leader contradicts himself on something as basic as whether he can talk about his own testimony. Senator Whitehouse ends his statement by saying he expects support from the committee. Not to punish, not to condemn, but to get the truth on the record. To obtain a document the director claims is already out there. To resolve contradictions that should never exist in the first place. And that's what makes this moment so powerful. It isn't a partisan showdown. It isn't a dramatic meltdown. It's a calm presentation of two verifiable facts that do not match the FBI director's sworn statements. And when someone in that position provides inconsistent answers on something this serious, the implications ripple outward because what else can't be trusted? What else has been withheld? What else has been presented as fact but doesn't match the record? And if this transcript reveals why he invoked the Fifth in the first place, what does that mean for the agency he now leads? Those questions hang in the air long after the senator finishes. And they're not the kind of questions Washington can wave away. Because this is about the integrity of a critical institution. One tasked with protecting Americans, enforcing the law, and maintaining public trust. If the director is willing to give conflicting explanations on something as simple as whether a transcript exists, how can the public have confidence in the decisions that affect the entire country? Senator Whitehouse is asking for accountability. And accountability begins with truth. Truth that isn't optional. Truth that isn't adjusted depending on who's asking. Truth that isn't reshaped to survive a tough question. And here's the most striking part of all this. The senator didn't need speculation, theories, or dramatic accusations. He only needed the record. He walked into the hearing with facts, rulings, statements, and contradictions. And he laid them out one by one, calmly, directly, and without theatrics. In a political world filled with noise, that kind of clarity stands out. It forces the room to listen. It forces the public to pay attention. And it forces the institutions involved to respond. This confrontation will not end with that hearing. Because now the committee must decide whether to demand the transcript officially. They must decide whether the contradictions rise to the level of investigation. And they must decide how to handle a situation where the director made statements that cannot be reconciled with the judge's ruling or the public record. And once that process begins, it doesn't stop. It leads to more questions, more documents, more scrutiny. It leads to pressure from both sides of the aisle. And it leads to a moment of truth not just for one man but for the agency he leads. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about politics. It's about whether the country can trust the chief of the FBI to be fully honest with the people's elected representatives. It's about whether the institutions built to protect democracy can survive if those who lead them are not transparent. And it's about whether officials in the highest positions believe they owe the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable. That's why Senator Whitehouse's statement matters. It's not the volume. It's not the tone. It's the evidence, the contradictions, the calm confidence of someone who knows the facts are on his side. And when a senator presents that kind of record, it demands attention, not excuses. That if you care about transparency, if you care about accountability, if you believe truth under oath should never be optional, then this is the moment to pay attention. Because the next steps will tell you everything about how seriously this country takes honesty in the highest levels of power. And what comes next could reshape how we see the institutions meant to serve us. If you want to stay ahead of every major moment like this, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and drop a comment so the algorithm knows you want the truth without the noise. More breakdowns of the biggest political confrontations are on the way, and you won't want to miss what happens next.